Welcome to the JB's Powercast, where we talk about industry news, events, performance parts, trucks and accessories, shop talk, and we'll even do a little bench racing. The JB's Powercast starts now.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. It's not Friday.
No,
it's Thursday.
It is Thursday, yeah.
I appreciate you coming in and
of course.
And
doesn't matter to me what day it is.
Changing the schedule so
yeah,
that
whatever.
I can go racing tomorrow.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
I was wondering. I was told that you weren't available, but I didn't know what you're doing. Racing all day. Lucky you.
And it's not Saturday too. It's a good thing.
Wow, that sounds like a fun weekend.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weather holds. Hopefully everything should be good. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you got for news this week, Corey?
Yeah, well, let's jump into it. There's a couple stories. We're going to talk about a race car, actually, but it's a little bit different. So we all know about the Ford Mustang Mach-E. I have my hesitations. Most people that have seen it have their hesitations. I mean,
Agreed.
What is it? It's a four-door EV crossover-looking thing with a Mustang badge? Like,
Right.
what? When they announced it, I didn't really get it. I don't think anybody really understands what they were doing with it. But I think there may be more to this car than we're giving it credit.
Sure.
So there's a race car coming out. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are familiar with Mr. Von Gittin Jr., of course. No
Yes.
stranger to Mustangs and fast Mustangs.
Not at all.
So he's developing a 1,400 horsepower car that is a Mustang Mach-E. So it's not a Mustang Mach-E that is, looks like one and is something totally different underneath.
Right.
It is like it's a production vehicle chassis. Obviously, it's beefed up and
Right.
everything, but it's well, I'll just explain it. So 7 motors is what's going to be powering it.
Okay.
It's all-wheel drive, 1,400 horsepower. They're calling it the Mustang Mach-E 1400. And I think once people see this thing tearing around, they're going to think a little bit differently about this whole car. So his company, RTR Vehicles, RTR is a pretty big brand name now, especially with Mustangs.
Yep.
He built Ken Block's Unicorn, the crazy twin-turbo all-wheel drive Mustang.
Every YouTube video ever coming up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He himself, his Formula D Mustang is like 1,100 horsepower, and he's super duper excited about this car. So normally what happens is Ford makes a car, and then Von Gittin Jr. gets it and starts tuning it and does the stuff.
Sure.
In this case, he went to them directly, and he's developing this car with them before the car's even out.
Cool.
So it's a little bit of a different cycle. And this car is like, I suspect that his race car will be finished and out before the production car is
Sure.
even out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat to see a race sort of built version of a car before we even get to really drive one, or at least it'll happen kind of at the same time.
Sure.
So style-wise, I mean, it kind of has that sort of 4-door small crossover-looking body, but the thing looks pretty good.
Yeah, I was just seeing the video there. It almost looks like, and Steve just put it back up there,
yeah.
but
It actually looks really good.
a bit of a focus in there.
Kind
Subaru
of.
guy might have been in the mix,
Yeah,
like,
totally. Well, I mean, it looks very kind of rally inspired, and
Sure.
Obviously big, fender flares and a big wing, and makes a ton of downforce, and but it looks like, would I say, does it look like a Mustang? No, but that's okay. That's totally fine. I don't think it needs to look like a Mustang.
Yeah, the only Mustang thing about it would be the taillights, because they have those, like, what looks to be the sequential.
Yes, the 3 and 3.
Right, but real aggressive looking.
Yeah, it looks killer. So underneath all that, the big flare fenders and the big Pikes Peak style wing, it is a production Mustang Mach-E unibody. Obviously, it's caged, it's reinforced, etc. So the normal one has a pretty big capacity battery, for distance, stuff like that. He's redesigned this to be a smaller but really hard-hitting battery. So basically, drifting or lapping for like a road course. Couple cool things that he's put in. The front drive shaft can be fully removed to switch it to an entirely rear drive to make it a drifter.
Right.
Or put it back in for like a time attack car.
Sure.
So a couple of neat things. One thing about this is, and I think this comes up a lot, we've talked about this, what should an electric car sound like? Especially something like this, that's like a drift car, it's a time attack car.
Sure.
People are so used to a particular sound, especially when it's got a Mustang name on it. What should they make this car sound like? We don't really know what the production one's going to sound like. The answer in this is apparently anything you want. It doesn't make a noise.
Right.
Right, obviously. So the Mach-E 1400s diffuser actually has a military-grade LRAD 100X loudspeaker behind it. So they can literally make it sound like anything they want. It's all computer programmed. They can make it sound like a V8, a V12, a V16, a 4-cylinder, an electric friggin' Jetsons car. And it's loud enough that it'll sound like it's coming from the car, and you'll be able to hear it from a mile away. So, kind of a cool approach to like, what does this thing sound like? Literally, whatever you want. Now, does faking a V8 in an electric car break the rules? I don't know. Does it really matter? At the end of the day?
That's kind of cool. And the fact that it's going to be sequenced with the throttle.
Totally, yeah.
And then I would guess, download whatever car sound you want.
Basically,
you
engineer a file. Sure.
I think this week Carrera GT.
Right. Yeah, maybe you want it to sound like a GTR. Maybe you want it to sound like a Ferrari F40. It doesn't really matter. You engineer a sound file, and then it sounds like whatever you want it to sound like. Which, again, is like, I don't know, is that kind of cheating the game of having a cool sounding car? Or is that like... or is that approaching the new level of like, man, yeah, yours sounds cool. Hold on.
Yeah,
listen
I like
to this.
that.
Yeah.
Let me make you a file and make it sound real cool.
Yeah.
But I think that is what everybody really wants, because I mean, you buy an exhaust kit for performance gain, but
also it's for sound.
Well, sure. The cans that everybody put on, on typically more import than V8.
Yeah.
Those did absolutely nothing but make it sound cool.
Nothing at all. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And after a while, you're like, okay, it doesn't sound cool anymore, and I don't want it. But
sure. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that my STI, the exhaust on it, might not make a single horsepower. Mm-hmm. That's not why I put it on.
No,
of course not.
No.
And I'm not ashamed of that, because I wanted to make noise.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what's the difference then? Maybe you want this Mustang Mach-E to sound like a
GT500.
Sure, exactly, a GT500, or like an STI, or a Focus, or whatever you want. I mean, that's kind of a cool approach. Again, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if some people think it's dumb and, it's not actually making that sound. So, well, who cares? Does it really matter? I don't know.
I'm with you on that. You're buying an electric vehicle. You have all this technology. Why wouldn't you use it?
Right. Why not? Yeah, exactly. And I mean, from his perspective, he's so used to these, these loud, raunchy V8s that like maybe that's what he wants, or maybe he just wants it to be quiet. Actually, there's a spy video of it doing donuts and stuff on a track, and it has no sound.
Right.
And that's neat, but weird. It's so much more weird to see it drifting silently.
Right.
So it honestly, it makes more sense to add noise to it. Even if it's not actually being produced by the motor, that doesn't really matter. Part of the experience of, motorsports is hearing the noise. And I don't think it really detracts whether it's not, whether it's the motor or not that's actually generating.
I agree with you. And a lot of drivers will have shift points and things like that they can hear the engine where it's at and then make a shift or add throttle, or if they're going into the corner, they know on the downshift they'll hear the engine blurp up. Well, on an electric car, you have
none of those cues. Yeah.
Right. So might help them. I don't know. I don't think they need the help. I mean, they drive. So
exactly.
I mean, it's not I'm learning how here, but
no.
Right.
So beyond that, beyond a fully customizable sound, Gittin Jr. in an interview said the car is infinitely tunable. Right? So, and this is a quote from him. He says, "It can behave any way you want it. When I first drove it, I was totally shocked. It's quick on a level I've never experienced." So the car and driver that I pulled this from, the interviewer said that he took out a laptop and brought up a video of him and Ken Block doing a test drive in this. And Ford hasn't given any specific numbers. We know it's 1400 because it's in the name.
Yeah.
But like, as far as lap times or 0 to 60s, they're keeping quiet on it because it does a little bit represent the Mach-E, which, again, it's going to surprise people. I know it. I know it is. This weird electric Mustang, it's really going to surprise a lot of 5-liter owners. But he said, I can't really talk about it, but it's freak out Ken Block quick, which is saying something.
Sure.
A video of him taking Ken Block in a test drive and Ken Block getting scared and screaming, that's saying something. That dude, obviously, notoriously is fairly fearless. I mean, his whole brand is based around him driving like an idiot.
Sure.
So, seeing him say, oh, holy shit, this thing's very fast.
Yeah.
That's saying something.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, we have this not ready yet production car that everyone's been kind of side-eyeing, myself included.
Sure.
That is like maybe a real serious contender. It puts a spotlight on something that everyone, I think, wasn't taking very seriously. But Ford, they're not dumb. Mustang is a performance name.
It is.
And it'd be crazy to build a non-performance named car. So I think they know what they're doing. And I'm actually like, even just seeing this, I'm 10 times more interested in this car than I was originally.
And I'm with you after you giving us the news and explaining it a bit. There won't be a car on the street that can touch it.
It's going to be hard.
Low slung weight because of the battery.
Yep.
1,400 horsepower. You're like, what on the road is going to all-wheel drive, 7 motors, everything that makes this thing work? You'd be hard-pressed to find anything else on the street, or take that out to a street legal, and probably, if it works, you're going to run in the 8 somewhere.
Oh, no doubt.
And then have the track people go, yeah, you can't go that fast.
Right. And say, yeah, but will it go around a corner? Yeah, sure. Push a button, load a tune. Oh yeah, will it drift? Yeah, no problem. Push a button, electronically unhook the front. Drivetrain or the axles, and then drift all day. Yeah, it's a pretty cool concept. The idea behind building, an all-purpose race car is not a thing.
No,
it can't be.
No,
but engineering a car to maybe not be all-purpose, but like some sort of multi-purpose car, that's pretty cool. A car that can like lay down time on the drag strip, also do time attack aggressively and drift in the same day.
Sure,
that's kind
and then
of
drive
not
it to
even
work.
Yeah, and then drive it home. That's not really a thing.
No.
So like they, obviously this car is very special and is not going to represent the production drive it off the lot version. No. But there's something going on here that says that, obviously he's, a rich masterclass tuner. He literally builds these cars for his business. But that isn't to say that like there aren't people who are going to figure out how to tune these things.
That's right.
That's always how that works.
You bet.
And I mean, tuning is not going away anytime soon.
Nope.
So, are we going to get electric car tuners where they boobity-bop, load a file, and now it's a drag car? Boobity-bop, now it's a drift car. Maybe.
Well, I'm with you. I agree 100%. That's exactly what it's going to be, because all you're doing is changing the programming, and it's direct drive electric engine.
Exactly.
So it's
cool. It's cool.
What's coming down the line is interesting because, we got James coming on the show in a little bit here, but part of it is we're going to talk about how easy it is to make horsepower. Mm-hmm. This is the definition of easy horsepower.
It really is.
This car is, do I want 1,400? Do I want 700, 800? It might even be on the dial on the dash that you can just pick
power setting.
Power setting, just like your dryer, 20, 30, 40. But
exactly.
It's I can't wait to see. I mean, we talked Bronco last week.
Sure.
And now we're talking Mustang. Correct me if I'm wrong or disagree, but Ford is leading the pack when it comes to
I don't disagree
innovation
at all.
and leading the way when it comes to putting things out.
Totally. It's like we said last week with the Bronco, like they're killing off a lot of their cars, but they're obviously focusing on some pretty special things that I think that they know that people are going to want.
Yeah.
And that's not, obviously, I don't, we've said it 100 times. I don't have any particular allegiance to Ford or GM or any of them, but I do think that Dodge and GM are going to be playing some catch up in the next 5 years or so. Yeah, as far as, I mean, who knows? They've got their own stuff cooking in the back, but Ford, their R&D and the stuff that they're putting together and putting out, and they feel like they have a really good understanding of maybe where it's going versus like where it's at today.
Yeah. And it's exciting. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Soon enough, we'll have them on the road and find out how untouchable they are when it comes to attack racing, drag racing, and drifting, right?
Totally.
So
we'll shift gears totally. We'll talk about tech a minute.
Sure.
And GM, actually, speaking of GM and catching up. GM does pretty good on the tech front.
Sure.
So a while ago, we talked about Cadillac has their new flagship, the Lyriq. Do you remember we talked about that a little bit? Mm-hmm. That's coming out. That is going to be an EV as well, an electric vehicle.
Okay.
So there, little bits and pieces here and there. Do you remember, I feel like 10 years ago or so, every concept car that came out, actually for more than 10 years ago, every concept car that came out that was like a, future-y concept car had this full dash screen. That was such a popular design cue, and it still is.
Sure.
Even from like the 90s, right? Where it's not a dash, it's not HVAC, it's not a glove box, it's not sectioned. It's like one continuous screen. It's very future-y.
Sure.
That's exactly what this is going to have.
Oh, cool.
So it stretches almost the entire length of the dash. It's a 33-inch display, which like the current biggest right now is 12, maybe, I think. I think that's about the biggest. Oh, I mean, aside from like a Tesla, which is vertical, obviously.
Right.
But even that, that's nowhere near 33 inches.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it's basically going to cover, like the entire section of the dash, all as one display. It'll be touchscreen. It's actually 3 separate displays all behind the glass, but they all work together. Simultaneously. So obviously it's all going to be OLED display. It's going to be bright and look great, and controls for...
That's unreal.
I know,
just looking at the picture now, but
it looks really, really nice. And obviously everything all digital, analog. Analog gauges hold a special place in my heart, especially 90s stuff. That's just my sort of my jam. But I mean, there's something about a fully digital, so many new cars now, just out of the box right now, have fully digital dashes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, most new GM products, the TAC and everything's all for any of the higher end stuff.
Yep, you bet.
So they're sort of taking it up one more step. It's interesting that, I was thinking about this last night when I was reading this. Where do we cross the line with something like distracted driving when the OE equipment is all touchscreen? Because like if you have your phone mounted on your dash and you're touching it, you can't do that.
Right.
That's distracted driving.
You bet.
If your entire display is a touchscreen, how is that any different? I don't really know where we draw the line. It's just I was thinking about that, and like you have to touch it. Well, I mean, obviously there'll be a lot of hands-free options, but some of the stuff you'll have to touch it. Whether you're touching your phone or whether you're touching your digital heat control, where I don't really know what the split is.
That's a good point, Corey, because that's exactly it. I guess it's not above the dash, but I guess it wouldn't matter if your phone was down here and you were sending a text message or doing something. Distracted driving.
Totally. So, even if you have your phone on like a dash mount on the dash and you're changing the song or something, you can't do that.
Right.
Right. You're looking at it, you're touching it, you're distracted. It's interesting where they're going to split. If you get pulled over, hey, I saw you touching your phone. No, it's my dash. Right. Oh, you're free to go, sir.
Right.
But you're doing the same action.
Precursor to self-driving cars?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. That's a good point, though. That's a really good point.
So some cool future tech coming out. And obviously stuff like this, again, we used to see concepts like this forever. And, not that long. I mean, this car is going to be coming out in 2022. So pretty soon, and like anything, technology is going to trickle down. In the next 5 years, we'll probably have some pretty snazzy wraparound digital OLED touch gauges, displays, all that stuff in some pretty common vehicles.
Yeah, that you're not going to be, you don't have to be the upper wealthier class of person to purchase it. It's going to be in the Hyundais, in the whatever that everybody can afford and
Absolutely.
own on.
Well, that Hyundai is going to be the first one to make it cheap.
Of course.
That's their game.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, but even now, like we talk financing, right? Everything is affordable.
Sure.
Like 12 years, finance this car.
Yeah, who cares?
So now you've taken that group of people that went from, I could afford a $40,000 car, to now I can afford an $80,000 car because I can finance it for 12 years.
Exactly.
And hey, you want it, get it. You only live once, you might as well try, right? But it's cool. Like everything that has to do with cars, all things that are happening in the world right now, it seems to be the for me anyways, the calming, the grounding that cars are still cool.
Absolutely.
And they're changing every day. And innovation is continually changing, and
and it hasn't slowed down one bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah. So just a couple stories. Not a huge busy week in the news this week, but that Mustang. I'm pretty stoked to see it. They had asked him if he could go for a test drive or something, and he's like, no, it's all, we can't do anything. And he's like, well, you know what? Actually, there's a video in that Car and Driver article as well that should be linked in the description if you want to see it. He goes, well, hold on. Yeah, set your camera up for a second. And in the shop at RTR, he's like, you can see it, but I can't take anything with it. He freaking goes ahead and does donuts like on the spot in his shop. He's like, this is the most I can do for you. So there's a cool video of Gittin Jr. doing donuts in his own shop.
Right.
Because why not?
Yeah.
He's excited about it.
Yeah, future goals that I can do a burnout inside my shop with all the other shit that's in it. Yeah. Right now I got to worry about bikes hitting the side of my vehicle, but hey, one day.
One day you'll be doing donuts in your own shop.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, otherwise, that's about it. I think we'll take a break. And like you said,
Corey.
James coming up next. And
we're going to talk transmissions.
Nice. Awesome. Cool.
See you guys in a bit.
Thanks.
How do you know you're looking at a serious street machine? It's rolling on Mickey Thompson tires. Generations of enthusiasts have been taking their car to the strip with the unfair advantage of street-legal rubber from Mickey Thompson tires. Get amazing performance on the street or at the track with the world's fastest street radials, available at JB's Power Center and jbspowercenter.com.
You expect the absolute peak of performance from your vehicle and your motor oil. Royal Purple synthetic motor oil with Cinerlec exceeds the toughest industry standards, with 6 times reduction in engine wear and 2 times greater protection against oil breakdown. Royal Purple is available for daily drivers, high-performance street machines, high-mileage vehicles, diesel trucks, and motorcycles. Protect your investment with the oil from the synthetic experts, Royal Purple. Available at all JB's Power Center locations and at jbspowercenter.com.
We're back, guys. James Hatfield, thanks, man. I appreciate you taking the time
Thanks for having me.
join me today. I know you had to take some time off work, and
Yeah.
I know we're racing
Snuck out
tomorrow.
for a few hours. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. Hopefully they're not watching. You didn't tell them, right?
No, they know where I'm at. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I asked James to come on the program today because I'd like to understand transmissions, and it's a personal interest of mine. And for me, you're the guy that I go to for answers when it comes to that, because you know your stuff. But before we get started, I want to ask you about your truck and Black X Racing. So tell us about your truck first.
My truck that I drag race is a 2002 Chevy S10. I actually bought the truck brand new in 2002.
Cool.
The intention was someday, oh, I see it's on the video there.
Yep,
That's fantastic. The intention was someday put a V8 in it and, you know, have a fun little street bruiser. And here we are 18 years later, and it's more race than street. And
Sure.
Obviously a lot further along than I ever thought it would be, but pretty cool deal. I've had it for its entire life, and it's had about 7 different engines in it. It was, like I said, it was originally a 4-cylinder truck. It's got more kilometers on it as a V8 than it did as a 4-cylinder. So that's kind of neat. And the Black X Racing thing, so I started a Facebook page for the truck and the racing that I do a couple years back. It was actually when we went in 2017. We took the truck to LS Fest, Holly LS Fest in Las Vegas. So
you bet.
rather than be one of those people on Facebook like that post pictures of their babies every day when they have a newborn, well, my truck's my baby. So rather than be that guy, I started a page people can choose to follow if they want. And so we went to LS Fest in 2017 and actually won the inaugural truck class in Las Vegas. So that was pretty cool. Very neat ordeal, cool road trip. If you ever have the opportunity to race in Las Vegas,
that's the place.
It's a world-class facility.
You bet.
Yeah, on another level. So
4 lanes, everything you could imagine.
Yeah.
Track prep, you bet.
Yeah. So now, you know, come to today, we're heads up drag racing. I run in a X275 or 275 drag radial type class. So it's there are some limitations, a 275 tire, and there are some horsepower limitations, but big power, small tire, wheelie bars aren't allowed. So you've seen on the video there, the truck likes to wheelie a little bit, and that class is usually high power, lots of action.
Sure.
And so yeah, that's the passion now. Chase that.
All heads up.
And all heads up. You know, who gets to the finish line first is going to be the one that wins the race. So
Yeah, and I think in the 275 class, you know, you can have 2,000 horsepower, 2,500 horsepower with the technology and the engines today.
Yep.
But yes, it matters. And yes, to be a super top competitor, you got to be in the area, which is fine. But it's more about understanding the rest of the vehicle and how the weight transfers and the chassis works to make sure that this tire that's 10.5 inches,
how do I use that?
how do I use that? How do I get it to stick without it flipping over backwards?
That's right.
Because a lot of the cars, or trucks, when you stand on, all it wants to do is just lift the wheels up and away you go, right?
Yeah, so there's definitely a science and an art to finessing that 275 tire down the track. Like you said, not uncommon to see 2,000 plus horsepower, and some of the entries may be lesser horsepower, but they generally get a weight brake, so they're still competitive.
For sure. For sure.
But yeah, there is a ton of technology and science in making them get from point A to point B on that small of a tire, and it's something that comes with a lot of seat time, a lot of experience. I honestly probably have about 2,000 laps in that truck at a drag strip.
That's incredible.
So
I got to ask you, James, like, and I've had, I think you're our first guest in a long time, but I've had Neil on the program before. You got the truck, you did the motor swap right away, when you started going faster. Was there ever a time that you thought I should get a purpose-built car or truck and keep this as your street bruiser, like you said, and said, I'm going to go all out on this one, but I want this one because I love it. It's my first truck. And did you ever think of that, or did you know that this was the one?
So the end of 2017 was a big turning point for me in that. At the end of 2017, I hurt the engine that was in the truck. It was a stock factory production block LS engine. Had a good crank in it and stuff like that, but just making enough power that the block was shifting, moving around, and wiped out the main line, essentially tore up the bearings and stuff like that. And that was kind of the turning point and decision for me. Is I want to go faster. I want to be competitive. I want to be able to run near the front or up front in this 275 class.
Sure.
Do I make that move and go into a purpose-built, as you look at the racetrack, it's all Fox body Mustangs, and there's a good reason for it. They're a very good platform for what we're doing.
Yep.
Do I make that change? And so I contemplated it. I thought long and hard about it, and what it came down to for me is I had already had the truck at that point for 15 years, 15 years invested in it in various ways, and I just figured there's probably going to be some limitations and setbacks as a result of staying in that platform, but I also didn't want to just push that truck in the corner and not really use it.
Right.
I mean, the reality is I might have two, but I'm probably only going to use one, and I figured that it would probably end up kind of just getting pushed in the corner and not utilized properly. So I decided to move forward with that course, made a whole bunch of chassis changes, did a new engine. It's entirely aftermarket pieces. I don't know that there's a single GM production piece in that engine anymore.
Sure.
And here we are. So
that's cool. So prior to you doing the change, which I'll ask you what you've got for motor and powertrain wise, but prior to going, like you said, to the front of the pack and wanting to be competitive, you're running GM production parts. What did you run for a motor?
Yeah, so it was the foundation was a 6-liter truck block. So 2002 to 06 GM 6-liter block. It had a low dollar, entry level forged crankshaft, so it was a Compstar piece, but like an Eagle or a Scat. It wasn't high end by any means. It did have a good connecting rod in it, good pistons, and then I had a good set of heads on it and stuff like that. So a very similar foundation to what you see a lot of today. Guys are building. You guys have in your engine program here, a forged bottom end production block with a good set of heads. And then, pound some boost down its throat with a turbocharger, and a guy can actually make some pretty good power. So that was the foundation for a long time, was that sort of, that sort of thing. It changed in cubic inches a few times over the years. And then when I decided to really step it up, I knew I had to get into a block. And one of the big setbacks for me with the production block was the head sealing, right? So production block, 4 bolts on the cylinder heads. You get into the aftermarket stuff, you get... six and your head gasket. So I started moving head gaskets somewhat often in the last year of racing. It made 1,270 horsepower to the tires in 2017 with production block. And the head gasket was, you had to watch it. You really had to watch the timing curve and things like that to try to keep the head gasket in it. And
we're getting some comments
cool
already
comments,
for you from good guys
see,
that watch.
Tokyo, I did... the Boosted Lifestyle YouTube channel, I did a Turbo 400 for those guys a little while back that they're going to be beating on this weekend, actually. I think so.
They're heading out to Rimby as well.
That'll be great.
And Kenny Joss,
Yeah. Good buddy of ours. Exactly. King of the 4L60E meme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now with the race engine and the truck, we got written down here 478 at 154.
Yeah, so that's current personal best, 8th mile. The truck is set up to go 8th mile only right now. It's not geared to go all the way But yeah, 478 at 154 in the 8th. And it's pretty good. Hoping to better that this weekend in Rimbey. The truck weighed, last time it was out, it was 3550 with me in it. It should be around the 3470 range now. I did work on getting some weight out of the truck. And
Cool.
Obviously, the lighter they are, the better they work. And I can actually be 3250 with my combination in the class. So a little bit overweight for the class, but it's still all steel, all glass. So
Right. And that is a testament to you building horsepower and keeping the truck the way it is, because you know, the easiest thing is ripping stuff out and
change
and
it to fiberglass, or carbon
creating
fiber,
a shell and all this stuff, because you want to take off all this weight. But truthfully, although it's not as much of a street truck anymore, you can still drive it.
It is still, it's registered, insured. It still does street drive. Annually, I'll take part in Southern Alberta's fastest streetcar shootout in Medicine Hat. Actually was fortunate enough to win that event a few times. And so yeah, it can be street driven. I just, I don't. It's one of those things that my self-control probably isn't strong enough to be out and about in that thing. It's you look at the gas pedal, you go to jail is generally how I explain it, right? So
Sure. Well, and that's just it. Knowing that, light to light, you could go pretty fast, and the DNA inside is like,
that's right. Yeah.
I think I'm going to give it a shot here, and just your luck, somebody's waiting for you.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Records. Tell me, first one. I know you're going after the Leaf Spring truck record.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I found out probably about 6 months ago that the Leaf Spring pickup truck 8th mile record is a 4:58 in the 8th mile, and I want to, I don't know if I'm going to get there, but it's something that I've kind of got my sights set on as a goal, and I at least want to be a part of that conversation. Leaf Springs are cool. Generally, the first thing people do building a drag strip or a drag car is cut the leaf springs out and go to a ladder bar or four link or whatever. I love leaf springs, and so to be able to maybe chase that record, or at least be a front runner there, or be a part of the conversation as the fastest leaf sprung pickup truck in the world, I think would be really cool.
And how close are we right now?
We're 478 now. The record's 458, and to be honest, 2/10 at that speed, it's still a long ways away, but we're going to try to close that gap a little bit this weekend. I don't think the weather and track surface will be there to get it this weekend, but it doesn't mean we ain't going to try. So
that's that's all you can do.
That's
every single time, try and be better and go faster. What record did you hold in 2008?
So
60E?
Yeah, go back almost 15 years, or 12 years now. So 4L60E transmissions are notoriously known as maybe a weaker piece or not a performance-oriented transmission, and in stock form they're not. They can be improved and built to handle some pretty decent power. And in 2008, I went 932 at 154 in the quarter mile with a 4L60E in my truck, and at that time, it was a true street truck. It had air conditioning, had two 10-inch subs behind the seat and amplifiers, and it was about 4,100 pounds. So that was pretty cool, and that's really what took me down the road of transmissions, was the swap initially. And so when I swapped it initially, it was a 5.3 liter and a 4L60E, and as I started adding power, I knew the transmission was going to become an issue. Young guy, not a lot of money.
Sure.
Also feel like, if somebody else can do this, maybe why can't I? And not afraid to put my hands on it and in it.
Give it a shot.
Try to give it a shot. And fortunately, I've had some really good people, really good mentors over the years that have helped me with a lot of the information. So I went after it and started out there just kind of working on my own thing, and picked away at that transmission and made it better and stronger, and kept moving forward with it until there. It was 932 at 154, and I decided I wanted to go faster. And when I did that, I wanted to be able to spool the turbo on the starting line. So I always foot braked the 4L60E, and I wanted to trans brake, and I just didn't think the 60 was going to be the right combination anymore.
Sure.
So at that time, I moved into a Turbo 400.
Yep.
And same thing, when it come time, I bought a complete unit, and when it came time to repair it or freshen it up and stuff like that, I took it on myself, and the snowball started rolling downhill, and
cool.
next thing you know, you got friends asking, hey, can you help me with this, or can we look at mine? And here we are, a dozen years later and a couple hundred transmissions later. And
sure, and I think that's a testament to car people and guys that like working on their cars, is that, you have the interest, just like you had when you did the first turbo LS in your truck. It's not like you knew what to do and how to dial it in, and it all of a sudden just went down the track.
Hadn't
and
the slightest
look out,
clue.
here I come. 2,000 laps later, yeah, you dialed it in, you know what it's going to do, you know what to expect, but it's the time you put in and the learning that you do to get the knowledge to understand it, right?
That's just it. Seat time is a big part of it.
It is, right? And working on it, working on the motors and understanding what it needs, and then why to do this piece next or that piece next, and we'll get right into it now. I mean, you said, why transmissions, right? Because we're very similar. Both car guys like motor, and I've had no drive to look into a transmission at all.
Right.
If somebody asks me how they work, I say it just does.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no,
science and wizards.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think a lot of guys are like me, that we have an understanding of how a transmission works generally, but ask me to put a manual valve body or how, got no driver in anything to even remotely want to do it, right?
Yeah.
So we know now that any vehicle or anything that we can buy off the shelf, we can build horsepower.
Absolutely.
And it's not hard to build horsepower anymore.
Horsepower is easy nowadays.
Put a turbo on your LS, you're going to make a couple hundred horsepower more easy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of guys are doing it.
Yep.
Go on YouTube and watch the Junkyard LS guys build 900 horsepower.
That's right. 650 to 750 horsepower is commonplace. It's no different than a decade ago where, 450 horsepower was commonplace. That number keeps growing, and when you get into, call it the meaner or faster street cars, 5 years ago, everybody had 1,000 horsepower. Now everybody has 1,500 horsepower. And
exactly.
Those are real numbers, and it's really not that difficult to get there anymore if you've got the right parts, pieces, and some people in your corner to help you get there.
Sure. So, got a Mustang. I was telling you about it the other day.
Yep.
It's got a 5.3 in it.
Sure.
It's going to get a turbo. And for whatever reason, my focus, and I mean, we've talked before, but the focus is build the motor, build the motor, build the motor.
Yeah.
I want it to make 800 horsepower. I want it to be this cool spooling turbo LS engine that I see on YouTube.
Sure.
Then I forget everything else after that. Right?
Yeah.
And
what goes behind that? Adel?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's important because, there's a couple of things. Safety is one of them.
Yep.
But, I can make a whole bunch of horsepower, but if I can't get it to the ground, really, what's the point?
Yeah.
So when we're talking torque converters, let's start right behind there.
Yep.
Give me your thoughts on the importance of having the right torque converter.
Yeah, so a torque converter to the transmission is like the camshaft is to the engine. It's one of the most important pieces in the combination, especially if you're at the drag strip. Torque converter will make or break your combination, and generally the guys that are running at the front of a heads-up racing class have had multiple converters in their car testing to find every last bit. And you'll see the guys with the turbo combinations nowadays that sit at the starting line for 10 seconds trying to get their car to come up on boost. Well, it doesn't have the right torque converter in it, or maybe there's some other issues at play with tune-up, but generally the torque converter can be one of the first places you look. And torque converter manipulation with fluid pressures and stuff like that can affect that too. But when you're trying to put a torque converter behind anything that makes good power, as a general statement, if you buy once, you cry once.
Right.
I think that making that initial investment, although it's expensive, it'll give back to you in performance. So I was actually talking to Mark Campbell from the Comp Performance Group yesterday, and we touched base about his personal Mustang. It's a Ford Mustang, very little done to it. TCI's got a great multi-disc converter for those new automatics in the Fords. And Mark did no other changes, put that converter in there, and picked up a half a second at the track. So the performance gains from a good torque converter are huge. It's the same with the newer GM stuff, whether you're using a 4L60, 4L80, the 6L80, 90 torque converter. one of the first places for performance improvement. If you're a guy that wants to go fast at the racetrack or on the street, torque converters are massive performance gains.
So at what point, James, in a build, do you think someone should be looking at torque converters? So, you know, we've got a muscle car guy comes into our shop here at JB's. You know, he's got a 68 Firebird.
Yep.
And it's got a small block in it, and he's got heads and a cam.
Sure.
You know, and a minor build, it makes that 500 horsepower.
Yep. So, rule of thumb, if you're changing your camshaft, change your torque converter.
Okay.
So, camshaft will manipulate where the engine makes power. It's generally going to, most guys, when they're putting a camshaft in, they're putting in a bigger one, so they're moving the power curve up.
Sure.
You're going to make more power, probably more torque, but you're going to make it later in the RPM curve.
Right.
So a stock production type torque converter that's designed to couple the engine at low RPM and provide high efficiency, low fluid temperatures, and general street manners is not going to lend itself to that performance camshaft. So rule of thumb, if you're changing your camshaft, change your torque converter.
Great. And I mean, I think that's excellent advice. And when guys talk stall speed, you're basing that on the camshaft spec?
Yeah, so if you get with a torque converter guy, and the biggest thing is to be honest with the torque converter guy.
Sure.
They will help you pick the right converter for your combination. So they're going to want to know the weight of the vehicle, what kind of horsepower it makes, generally where you're going to shift it, shift extension, or how far the engine falls back going into the next gear is a big part of torque converter selection. And if you're honest with those guys, they'll get you a piece that works pretty good. One of the things that I see all the time is the guys are in the middle of the build, they'll pick up the phone, they'll order a torque converter, and when the company asks them how much power is it going to make, well, it's going to make 1,500 horsepower.
Right.
And then the day that it comes out on the street, it makes 750 horsepower,
right.
and it won't spool, and and the manners are just not right because they weren't honest with the converter guys.
Right.
So one converter might not last you the entire life of your vehicle.
Sure.
Everybody generally seems to grow in horsepower and grow in what their expectations are from the vehicle. So a one-size-fits-all converter doesn't really exist.
I agree.
You can move from combination to combination a little bit, but again, it's one of those things. If you're honest with the converter guy, there's a lot of really good converter companies out there. You guys carry TCI here.
Yep,
They can set you up with a
bet,
really good piece. My preference for the late model electronic torque converters is Yank, Yank Performance. Good friend of mine, Colin Richter, owns Richter Performance Modifications in Lethbridge. They're the Canadian distributor for Yank, and those are great pieces for the electronic trannies. So.
And I think, you know, we've talked about it before on this podcast and with guys that, for whatever reason, us guys, when we're talking horsepower, we always add 400 or 500 to what.
Absolutely.
What the, you know, like
that's right.
Size does matter, but when you're talking about your car,
Yeah.
just be honest. Nobody else is listening.
And
right?
dyno numbers are really no different.
Exactly.
The lie detector is the racetrack.
Right. Yeah.
And if it, you know, if your dyno number or your dyno sheet said, "Oh, I made 1,500 horsepower," and the thing doesn't go 160 mile an hour, no, it didn't.
Right. Right.
So.
And the other thing to take, you know, about being honest is, they purpose build torque converters for what you're doing. Because if you're a nitrous guy versus a turbo
totally
guy,
different piece. Yeah.
totally different piece. Can you use one for the other?
Sure.
Like you said, sure. Throw it in there.
Don't
It's
expect
probably,
great results.
Right.
Yeah.
And whatever your expectations are, it's about being honest of what the goal is, what the horsepower is, and you're right. A lot of guys will buy the torque converter, then pick the camshaft. Right. Because or it's taking 2 years to build, and the camshaft they picked, they decided to change it.
Yeah.
And then they put it all together, and it's the camshaft's fault that it's not making power.
That's right.
Because I've heard Mark tell me that before. He's like, you know, it's unbelievable how this motor should have made 750 horsepower. Well, it took you 2 years to build, and you changed 12 different parts based on the first camshaft.
Yeah.
And now you went to the other one. Now it's the fault of the camshaft.
There's a reason you see new parts in all these buy and sell groups on Facebook, because guys don't stay the course from day one to the end of the project.
Right. So great. So, you know, being honest about what the motor makes for horsepower, what the goal is, the vehicle and the camshaft spec is great. So, okay, I picked my torque converter. We're talking same car. You know, they're 3,500 pounds. Small block, makes about 600 horsepower. What like should you be thinking next for transmission wise? Like, is it hey, have somebody go through it, or is it no? You know what? You got a good converter, maybe a transcooler, or a shift kit or something like that. What do you think?
Yeah. So. In part of your combination selection, you have to decide what your use for the vehicle is. So if it's, most of the people that are going to watch this, or 90% of the people out there, they're going to want to drive it on the street. Of course. And they're going to want a dual purpose vehicle that I can, I can take it and I can go to Jasper or Banff, I can drive the thing, but when I smash on it from light to light, I want some pretty darn good performance. So part of your transmission selection is going to be based around that. If you want an overdrive, if you want electronic control, if you're looking at late model stuff and you want to be able to control it with a factory ECU or some of the aftermarket controllers, make that choice accordingly. Overdrive is very important if you're going to highway drive it, and then a lock-up converter will make a big difference on the highway. But yeah, if you've added a performance torque converter, you need to add cooling ability.
Okay.
So what you've done when you change the torque converter from a stock to an aftermarket converter is you've basically changed the amount of fluid shear that goes on inside the converter. So generalization of how a torque converter works is if you take a fan here that's plugged into the wall and it's running, and you put a fan here that's not plugged in, you put them close enough together, the second fan is going to start to spin. Right. So look at fan A that's plugged into the wall as your engine. It's turning the pump of the torque converter. Fan B is the turbine in the torque converter, and eventually it's going to turn. Right. And inside a torque converter, that happens with fluid. But when your foot's on the brake pedal, your other foot's on the gas, this one's turning really fast, this one's not turning. Right. You are making heat at an astronomical rate. So having good cooling, a big cooler, something like a B&M supercooler or a supercooler with a fan, that goes a long way in transmission health and lifespan. So heat's one of the number one killers. There is it breaks down fluid, it hardens seals and things like that. So if you've added a torque converter, get a good cooler.
I think that's great advice. Now, what about the shift kit? You see how guys, I got a stage 2 or a stage 3 shift kit.
A shift kit for, for your entry level guy that's going to be, I'm a guy at home, I'm a DIY type guy, I want to work on this thing myself. Shift kit is good. It'll add a little bit of line pressure. Line pressure increases the clamping capacity for the clutch packs. Some additional line pressure is good. The rule of some is good, more is better doesn't always apply, but adding a little bit of line pressure is a good thing. It'll also reduce some of the accumulation. Accumulation is what makes a car shift nice or soft, because the general user wants something that doesn't bang into the next gear or shift firmly. So you start modifying some of that, you'll increase the holding power of the transmission. So for your average DIY guy, maybe it's a heads cam setup or just a camshaft, or maybe just bolt-on cold air intake headers and stuff like that. A shift kit and a little bit of a torque converter, it's going to make a massive difference in how the vehicle feels, performs, and stuff like that. So good place to start.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you're right when you say that is the general population. I want to be able to drive my vehicle out to the racetrack. I want to be able to go for a burger on a Saturday. But hey, when I get to the racetrack, I want to be the fastest guy out there because I want a multi-purpose vehicle. Right. So, I mean, it's good advice that converter, cooler, shift kit, good fluid.
Good fluid. I mean, fluid is, don't buy, no slight to Canadian Tire, but don't buy Motomaster fluid and put it in your performance piece. It doesn't have the same quality performance aspects that something like this is. Those fluids are designed for price point in mind. These fluids, like Redline, ATI Super Shift or TCI Max Shift, they're a good quality base stock. Sure. I don't know if you guys have looked at maybe getting one of the driven guys on here to do some oils and technology behind oils.
There's a lot of technology
in an oil, and a good fluid can make or break a transmission. So,
great advice. So now let's get into Neil's here. He thinks you look great and put the work in 275. Yeah, I guess I'm chopped liver next to you. He doesn't want to comment, but we'll leave that for another time, right? Yep. At what point, James, in a build or at a horsepower level, do you think somebody should be taking the transmission out of their vehicle and having someone go through it, someone build it up, someone make it, better. So
Yeah.
is it at like 650 horse, or is it more what you're doing?
Pretty tough to give it a general statement, but if it's the DIY guy I'm building this thing in my garage, I want to go play. If you can find a good running unit and you do that, like we talked about, a shift kit and a mild converter, you're going to get some decent life out of it. Generally, what I'll tell guys is if you don't have a problem with it, don't fix it.
Right.
And but if you want to, if you're building for performance and you're actually planning ahead, then that piece does need to be addressed. We talked about this a little bit prior to the show, with how easy it is to make horsepower today, and the easily available turbos or eBay type stuff that a guy can bolt on, stuff that didn't cost him all that much money, and make 600, 700, 800 horsepower. The easy button for a transmission isn't always there, right? So you need to start looking at that, otherwise it is going to fail you. So I would say if you're over 600 horsepower, you need to start thinking about your transmission in some fashion. Doesn't matter what transmission it is. I mean, you're probably not going to make it to 600 horsepower with a stock type 4L60E, even with a shift kit. But if you've got a 4L80 or a Turbo 400 or something like that, and it's got reasonable health quality in it to begin with, it'll do you okay for a little while, for sure. But if you're planning for growth and you want to make that, if you're reading the internet and it's like, I'm going to build 700 horsepower, you got to take a look at it. Sure.
Now, when you're in that 700 horsepower range, should you be thinking manual valve body right away, or what would be the advice that you tell somebody that, okay, I know I'm going to build lots of horsepower, I'm going to get the transmission out, what am I looking to do? Is it a complete rebuild front to backs, I got to do every piece, or is it, you got to start with a manual valve body that'll help there, and again, generalized.
Yeah, so if your goals or your focus is track oriented, and track performance means as much or more to you than street performance, look at those manual valve bodies.
Right.
They're going to give you the ability as the user to control the shifts. They're going to give you a really strong positive shift every time.
Yep.
And they also put a lot of pressure on the clutch packs to keep the clutch life up. So if your goals are street driver, street bruiser, and I'm going to take it to the track twice a year, go to the JB's Power Center Street Legals on a Friday night, then you probably don't want that manual valve body. You probably want some sort of an auto shift setup, and that's a user thing. So there's valve bodies available in the aftermarket. TCI has a lot of different offerings that are available here at JB's, and you can use an auto shift valve body in a Turbo 350, Turbo 400, 727, all of those things that are they're gonna add that holding capacity, add that performance level, but still allow you to put it in drive and drive it, and it'll take care of the shifting for you.
Right.
I would say, exactly that. If you're going to the racetrack and that means something to you, you want to look at manual valve body.
Okay. Then I would say trans brake, obviously.
Okay, so trans brake. If you're going to be on a drag strip with a turbocharger, you need a trans brake.
Right.
You will be the guy that isn't winning the races and getting that yellow slip at the time booth if you don't have one.
Right.
It's a big part of staging and being good off the light with a turbo vehicle is to have a trans brake. If you're a nitrous guy or you're a roots type or positive displacement supercharger, you're probably fine with a foot brake for a long time.
Before you
trans
need
brake
to.
can add to your program, but exactly. Turbocharger equals must have trans brake. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So something like that. Look at it like that. If you make a pile of low end torque immediately, you can get away without the trans brake. But it is still something that can add to your program for consistency, anyways.
Great. Now, at what level, would you say, that you would need to start looking at drums and going to a case and bell housings and stuff like that?
Yeah.
At what level of performance on the motor side to the other side, to say, okay, now you're at the level where it's actually unsafe for you to be doing what you're doing and you need to change it?
So there are some NHRA rules in place that go around that, and they're generally by ET. So if you start running faster than 1099, there becomes some equipment restrictions like trans blankets and flex plate shields and aftermarket flex plates. So, excuse me, a factory flex plate, usually pretty thin, some sort of stamped steel piece. They do break, they will fatigue. So if you follow the rule book, it's a good guideline on where to go. But if you're, you know what, if you're above 600 or 650 horsepower, those are all things you need to start thinking about.
Sure.
It also depends on what unit. There will be some drum changes required in the late model 4L60Es prior to that 650 horsepower level to get them to work or to live. The 4L80 in stock form, the drums and stuff like that, they're going to go to about that 900 horsepower range before you need really much to be addressed there.
Cool.
A lot of capability in that transmission. So when you get into a case or something like this, so a case is good if you're a drag guy that's at the track. There is that rule book restriction that I need to have some sort of a transmission shield. So in the event that a drum does come apart, it can't get outside the case and get into the cockpit of the vehicle. The blanket is like putting a winter jacket on your transmission, right?
Talk about building heat.
You talk about building heat. It's harder for them to shed heat. Sometimes there's trans-tunnel restrictions that'll make it tough to put a blanket on the transmission. And then also, if you've got headers that are really close, the blanket wants to melt too. Right? So you get into an aftermarket SFI-approved case, it takes care of all of that for you, and then generally the cases have a lot of features built into them that are specifically around performance.
Yeah. So we'll go to a question here.
Okay.
I think we've got a couple up, so we'll ask the first one. What about choice of transmissions, high to low horsepower? Best to use a specific trans with an adapter versus staying motor brand to trans brand specific, i.e., 440 to 727 or a 440 to a 4L60. And I know that's coming from Sean Landsman,
which
because
is fine.
he's thinking about running a 4L60 in his.
And that's, I mean, you want to pick that transmission again. You want to pick it. So in that specific question, I would say if the 4L60E is something that suits you because of its characteristics, being that it's electronically controlled and overdrive, there's nothing wrong with that unit.
Sure.
Obviously, don't go sticking that thing behind 850 horsepower, but if you have a 450 horsepower vehicle that you have some sort of aftermarket engine controller on or a aftermarket transmission controller, that's a great piece. There's a lot of adapters available in the aftermarket to easily put GM transmissions behind anything, really.
Sure. Right.
You can put them Turbo 400s, you can put them behind just about anything, whether it's a 2JZ or a Ford or a mod motor or whatever. It's very, very easy to do. With the availability of 4L60s, 4L80s, parts for them, it's generally an economical swap option as well.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, Sean's a Mopar guy, so it starts at 1,000 horsepower once you say I have a Hemi or any type of big block Mopar, right? Just ask my
1,000
cousin
horsepower
Chad,
and a
he'll
lot
tell
of
you.
valve train issues.
Mike Collins, how many horsepower before someone needs to inspect my Wizards and my Turbo 400?
Well, the Turbo 400 is a pretty robust piece. The struggle there is if you're grabbing a core, you're grabbing something. GM discontinued the 400 in about 91 or 92 off the top of my head here. So you're looking at minimum 30 years in probably a junkyard or maybe in somebody's shop.
Yep.
Chances are it wasn't stored properly, may have got water in it and stuff like that. So if you're using a Turbo 400 in a performance application, I wouldn't grab one out of the junkyard without doing something with it. That isn't to say that it couldn't be capable, but if water has got in that thing, the frictions are toast.
Sure.
So.
Any thoughts on the TCI 4X, 6X transmissions?
Yeah, great pieces. TCI has done a lot of research and development on those things. They were trying to give the performance aftermarket a turnkey solution that they have a controller, they have a good piece, they've got converters to match, and if you're a guy that doesn't really want to do it yourself and wants to just get I need something that's going to work, it's a matched combination, they're very cool. The 6X is actually a modified 4L80 to do 6 gears, and it's a pretty cool piece. Very neat offering from TCI.
That's awesome. I want to go back just a little bit. So all your years racing, your truck, and all the track time you've been, and helping friends, and you know, when we're talking safety, and at JB's we sell a lot of safety gear. We're continually trying to keep up on the stock with safety gear. You know, I guess you can see YouTube videos, but tell me what the potential hazard is of a transmission and a torque converter if you don't change it. You know, and you know, what have you seen or what have you heard of that's you know, like, thank God they had the safety stuff on there.
So
you know?
one of the big things with torque converters, pretty rare nowadays that you would find any aftermarket offering that doesn't have anti-ballooning features.
Sure.
And what that means is the fluid pressure in the converter will exceed the structural strength of the body of the converter, and it will actually change shape or blow up like a balloon. When that happens, it'll put a lot of force on the back of the crankshaft, which is going to hurt the engine. So danger to you as the driver, probably not a whole lot in that specific scenario, but danger to your engine, which is danger to your wallet.
Absolutely.
And a torque converter can explode. It's pretty rare. They're a welded steel piece, so it's, you know, reasonably unlikely that you're going to have that failure. But if it's a stock converter, none of the components inside it were probably designed around, you know, that big horsepower. Should a converter fail, it can get through the bell housing and into the vehicle. So that's when you start seeing NHRA requirements for bell housing shields or an aftermarket case like Reed offers or Speedmaster offers some cases that are thicker, stronger to try to prevent that piece when it goes bad from getting into the vehicle. So flex plate shield. So if a flex plate breaks, I mean, if you look at a flex plate, it's basically a saw blade.
Yes.
And when that thing's at 7,000 RPM, like your engine, if it fails, it's a saw blade now moving through the vehicle. So you want something to stop it from doing that, whether it's a bell housing or a shield. And then the case itself, that's where those blankets and or aftermarket cases come in. Cast iron drums in stock applications, when they spin at high RPM or crazy speeds, they can fail. The 727 is fairly notorious for drum issues, and if they come through the case of the tranny, it can get into the vehicle. So there's some user danger there. So if you're in a performance aftermarket piece above 650 horsepower, give some thought to a drum. It's maybe not mandatory, but safety should be a part of your program as well.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And the truth is like you said, the flex plate becomes a saw blade. Well, it can bounce off the ground, which isn't going anywhere, but it goes up through your vehicle. Yeah. It's going through it.
Yeah.
And it's...
That's right. Yeah. And it may actually hit the concrete first and then come back up. So you need to stop it. I see a really good question for Kevin Clark there. Yep. So Turbo 400 versus Power Glide. So my advice there would be, this would be drag racing advice, is you got to decide. I like to work backwards in that scenario. So what type of racing are you doing? Quarter mile, eighth mile, and then start working back from finish line RPM. So in my case, with a 275 tire, I'm going through the traps at 7,800 RPM, and I want to go through the traps at that RPM because I want the engine to be at peak power and stuff like that. So I start working back from there. So I need to gear the back end of the vehicle, the rear gear, to do that. So in my application, it's a 410. Now when I come back to the starting line, I've got a 410 in the rear gear. What does my first gear look like
on the transmission
to make the starting line ratio, or what kind of power am I going to put to the tire at the starting line work with what we're trying to do? So the aftermarket Power Glides, you're going to see generally a 180 first gear is probably the most popular option. Turbo 400 in stock form and what most guys use is a 248 first gear. So a 248 first gear with 1,500 plus horsepower and a 410 rear gear, the vehicle isn't going anywhere. It's making tire smoke. That's all it's doing. Yeah. So starting line ratio on a 275 tire, to calculate starting line ratio, you would take your rear gear, multiply it by the first gear in the transmission. I like to be around the 6.0 to 615, 620 range with a 275 tire and 1,500-ish horsepower on the starting line. So in my application, what that looked like was 158 first gear in a Power Glide and a 410 rear gear. So now if you need to start going faster, or the vehicle is making more power and you're making more mile an hour, well, maybe you have to change the rear gear to accommodate that. you might have to change first gear to address that as well.
Right.
Differences between the two, an aftermarket case, Power Glide versus a stock case Turbo 400, there's about 30 pounds difference, so there's a little bit of weight. Pretty popular to see the Power Glides in 275 anyways because of that first gear ratio. You can leave in second gear in a Turbo 400 and that works great, but generally the cost to do a second gear leave in a 400 becomes...
Well, yeah, substantial, because now you're getting the 2-speed 400s. That's
Right.
exactly what they're doing, and they're being purpose-built for that.
Yeah, so at minimum you need a valve body, right?
Right.
You need a valve body that allows you to leave in second gear, and you're still in a stock case. If you get into a case like this, that's an aftermarket case, plus the valve body, plus the drum, plus the input shaft, and things like that, the cost of a 2-speed 400 gets up there, and the Power Glide generally is a little bit of a cheaper option.
Right.
But it works really well for what we're doing anyways in a 275 tire application. Now, a big tire application, maybe that 400 works better because you can get away with a more aggressive starting line ratio.
Sure, right, because you can bite a little bit harder and leave a little bit harder based on that. That's great. And so over that 650, 700 range, you got to look at internals. We talked internals, we talked bell housing and case, safety. The last thing you want is something coming through the floor at you. And there's a reason that the NHRA rules are there, because they understand what we're talking about.
Right.
That, at 8,000 RPM, you probably should have a decent flex plate on there. But above that, if it comes off, it should hit a shield or a blanket or something.
You want it to run into something before it gets to you.
Gets to you, right? Because you're literally sitting next
That's
to it.
right.
Right?
Yep.
Want to get into a little bit on the tuning side. We can always revert back to transmissions a little bit, but the Terminator X Max.
Sure.
It's a real popular piece for us. We're selling a ton of them.
Fantastic piece.
With your experience tuning in Holly and stuff like that, what are your initial thoughts on tuning with the Terminator X?
Yeah.
And what can someone expect when they're buying a piece like that?
So if you're looking to do a swap or do something that didn't originally come with a controller capable of controlling an aftermarket, controlling a transmission,
Yep.
So anything, if you're using the 4L60, 4L80 and it's not in a GM vehicle that had a transmission control setup to begin with,
Right.
the Terminator X is a pretty attractive option. So
Sure.
Holly's had those things out for about a year and a half now, and the price point is awesome, and the features at that price point are really ridiculous, to be honest. It's a highly capable unit, and the transmission control in it right now, GM-wise, they can control the 4L60 and 4L80, and they can control some of the 4R70 series transmissions in the Ford world. The controller works well. Holly's canned tune-ups are pretty aggressive on line pressure to begin with, which is okay because a lot of guys will put that in and they're not going to wound it because of improper line pressure settings. So transmission tuning is it's a little bit of an art form itself. And the Holly controller, really good job. Does a very good job, gives the user the ability to control all the different shift settings. What do I want it to shift at from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4? How do I want it to downshift? Where do I want the transmission controller to lock up the torque converter and things like that? So you have to be in the X Max line to get transmission control. The Terminator X will not do it, but it's a great controller.
And how important is it to have that transmission control if you have the electronic
You got to control it somehow.
Right.
So if your transmission has an E on the end with a GM series, you need some form of electronic transmission control. So there are some aftermarket valve bodies available that will make those transmissions full manual, but probably 9 out of 10 guys aren't using that. So if you're looking at a swap of any form and you're going to put a 4L60E or 4L80E behind it, you need some form of transmission control.
Yeah, and I mean that'll just help you all around driving at the drag strip, whatever you're doing. I want to go back. We're talking drag racing a lot. Obviously, that's what we do.
That's what we do.
Burnout.
Yep.
You hear a lot of guys and a lot of people talk about the burnout.
Yep.
And some guys you see start off slow and come into the burnout, and some guys are shifting gears in the middle of the burnout. Yep. What are the potential hazards, if any, of coming into the water box, coming out of it? You're going to do your burnout. should you be shifting, or does it depend on transmission? Give us
Yeah,
what
so
your thoughts are.
It depends a lot on transmission. A lot of the notes you will hear around burnout procedure are the Turbo 400-like transmission. So Turbo 400, 4L80, they have a sprag in them. It's essentially a one-way clutch.
Yep.
And in a burnout, the characteristics of a burnout, they put a lot of shock on that component. So your best practice in a Turbo 400 is to start in at least second gear to do a burnout. If your vehicle has the muscle to start in third, there's nothing wrong with doing that either. You can start in third. There's no shifting involved. There's a lot less load on the components during a burnout than people would think.
Right.
And that shock, while the vehicle's tires are free spinning, is what can do damage. So it's really dependent on the specific model.
Okay.
But if you have, general statement, if you have a Turbo 400, 4L80, if you can start in at least second, that's good practice. And then the other thing is to try to finesse the tires to a screeching halt, not rev the heck out of the thing and let them. If you're at the racetrack and you hear that big when a guy comes out of the burnout box, that's hard on parts too.
Sure.
Try to gradually bring the tires to a stop if you can.
So would you say avoid shifting during the burnout?
If your vehicle has the muscle to do it, sure.
What are the potential hazards of going first to second? Let's say that 600 horsepower guy might not have enough.
That shock load on those components. So if you have to do it, so good question. If you have to shift because your vehicle, you know what, there's a lot of turbo cars out there that they don't have enough muscle without the turbo lit to spin the tires. If you have to shift it, do it as early as you can.
Right.
Get the vehicle spinning, poke the next gear, and then try to get to high gear as quick as possible.
Right.
Don't rev the thing all the way to, say, 7,000 RPM and then bang the next gear in the burnout.
That makes sense. And I mean, there's a lot of different strategies what guys do. And I agree with you on coming out of the burnout box and finessing it to a rolling stop as opposed to foot right out of it.
Big screeching.
Let the car twist sideways because it's...
There's a lot of shock when those tires come to a halt.
Right. Yeah. But, the fact that, I think now that our listeners are understanding that the shock when you're shifting between gears during the burnout at 6,000 RPM, let alone having the car bite down on the surface and then start you want to preserve your parts. You don't want to be breaking them on the burnout, right?
Yep.
So with the Terminator X, setting your transmission controls, should you just follow the basics to start with, or is there something that you would advise anybody doing it to?
Yeah, so if you're a do-it-yourself guy who's going to try to use that Terminator X, in a canned form,
sure,
and do it at home, use some of the self-learning functions, stay the course with what they've optioned in their canned tune-ups. So they've got some good enough transmission logic control in the way that their canned setups are. One of the things that I would recommend to anybody that's using that Terminator X or Terminator X Max lineup is, after you've got it, take it to a tuner.
Right.
Get the best or the most out of what you've just purchased.
Sure.
There's a lot left to be desired in the self-tuning platform, and especially in transmission control. If you can and you can afford to take it to a proper tuning location, do it. You'll get the best out of your control.
Right. I mean, get it going, but then, like you said, don't leave anything on the table. Let someone go through it.
Let somebody who's trained to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We kind of skipped over this at the start.
Sure.
But, you know as well as I know that, all the time spent building not only a 275 vehicle, but any type of a vehicle takes friends, sponsors, and family. Who do you got as sponsors that work for you? Or work is the wrong question, but help you out.
Help me out.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, so a couple of the people in my corner, Colin Richter at Richter Performance Modifications in Lethbridge, he's generally the guy that's standing on the starting line behind my truck when I'm racing.
Yep.
He's helped me a ton, whether it's just emotional support, hands-on support, a little bit of financial help, and things like that. Colin's a big part of the program and where it's gotten to. Ryan Bell, FPS Engines, he's local in Edmonton here. He does the horsepower in my truck, and it seems to have plenty most days.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Pinups Detailing here in Edmonton.
Yep.
The truck usually is show car ready, so a big part of keeping it that way is the guys at Pinup, another local company. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank here, so I'm going to have to use a little bit of help. Oh, JB's Power Center. Yeah, exactly.
That's why I pushed it over to you.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. Here I am.
Look behind you. No, just kidding.
The guys at JB's. So I moved to Edmonton in 2004 and stumbled across JB's as, oh, here's a performance shop. You know,
Sure.
this is who I'm gonna use to buy some parts from. And in that 16 years that I've been in the city, I've built a relationship with a lot of people at JB's and a lot of people in the back end here. And the company as a whole has been very good to me. Jim Bell himself and his support of the local racing environment.
You bet.
You know, Friday Night Street Legal is brought to you by JB's Power Center.
bet.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
And so I very much appreciate the support from the guys right here. And Kenny Joss at KJ Concepts, he's been poking in on some of
you
the
bet.
stuff here. He's always providing me with whatever I need for artwork and stuff like that and support. So if I'm doing a decal or a logo, or I just ordered a new fire suit and had a bunch of embroidery done on it, and Kenny Joss helped out with a lot of that. So
That's
those
awesome.
are some of the people that help make the wheels turn.
Yeah.
Lots of friends and family.
100%.
Team North, we call, you know, the group of us that race together. We're all generally hands-on with each other's vehicles if we need
bet.
to be. So there's a bunch of guys in the corner.
It's needed because, you know,
Absolutely.
like you said,
Nobody's doing this by themselves.
No, it's
Yeah.
you're never by yourself. It's not always about, you know, dollars spent and I have the best of everything. It's about family and friends around you, like you said, emotional support. It's about you know, being together and celebrating wins and losses. It's all a part of it.
Yep.
Let's talk the race this weekend. We got somebody ask a question there for you,
Sure.
but we'll get to it. What's happening this weekend in Rimbey?
So yeah, Rimbey. Starting tomorrow, testing starts at noon. The West Coast Pro Mods have invited some 275 cars to come race with them. So we've got Pro Mods and X275 at Central Alberta Raceways this weekend.
Yep.
So far, I think we have 12 or 13 Pro Mod cars registered. If anybody's watching and doesn't know what a Pro Mod is, those things are awesome. So you're looking at purpose-built race cars, generally a fabricated chassis, some sort of composite body, whether it's fiberglass or carbon fiber, and all of the horsepower, anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 horsepower, depending on the combinations.
Yeah.
Very loud in their design and color. They're the ones that you see that got the awesome paint jobs and stuff like that. And so those will be very cool to watch. Some local guys are going to be there. Gary Urlacher, the Vogt brothers, Joe Delahaye. Those are all local guys. There's some guys coming from Mission, JS Power Sports, and stuff like that. So some good local guys coming to race. There's quite a few people traveling from out of town for this race this weekend. X275, I think we had 15 entries as of this morning, which was
awesome.
It's about the best turnout we're going to have in Alberta in the last little while. So.
I'll go through some of the sponsors here for you because you know you sent them to me. I just forgot to print you one. But Artex Barn Solutions.
Yeah.
And these guys sponsor the West Coast Pro Mod
This is
Series.
West Coast Pro Mod Series sponsors, and then there's a couple of weekend sponsors as well.
Bet. So Artex Barn Solutions, DY Concrete Pumps, DeKalb Ventures, and then the weekend sponsors, Eberts Brothers Racing, which is
local company
here,
as well,
and Fuse Fuels.
Yeah, so thank you. If any of those guys see this, thank you for your support of racing. I know that given the current times and environment, it's pretty challenging to get anybody to donate money for things that aren't absolutely mandatory.
Yep.
So thank you very much to those people that support the racing, and to anybody who's maybe considering coming out there to watch. The racetracks need us right now too. So we've got Castrol Raceway in Edmonton, Rimbey, Central Alberta Raceways, and then the Medicine Hat Drag Strip, and there's a new one, Area 53 out in Forestburg.
Yeah.
Most of these places are non-for-profit and require funding from fans and competitor entries. So if we want to have it and we don't want to lose it, we got to use it. So
we got to support it.
We need to support it. So thank you to all those racing facilities for giving us a safe place to do what we do and have some fun. And for anybody that's watching and considering coming out, please do.
Yeah. So Mike Davis, who you got your money on this weekend?
Who do I got my money on this weekend? So, I mean, obviously, I want to have some money on myself.
Exactly.
I'm gonna fight to the bitter end. I was lucky enough in the late fall last year to win No Prep 5 at Central Alberta Raceways. So this will be the first time I've been back there since that win in a competition environment. But there's some pretty fast stuff. Obviously, Neil Richards with the Cream Dream. He's the guy with the target on his back that everybody's hunting for.
And it's a big one.
Daniel Rodrigue from the Mission area, he's bringing that beautiful black Malibu big block nitrous combination.
Nitrous car, yeah, you bet.
If that thing doesn't tear the back bumper off and go straight down the track, it's going to be a good race, and obviously I'm going to be trying to hunt in there as well. So some big fast cars, if you like big wheel stands, lots of horsepower, colorful personalities, the 275 class is a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, I think I'll put my money on you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for tuning in. James, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you very much, guys.
It was awesome.
Appreciate you having me.
We'll be out at the racetrack tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to JB's Powercast.
Check out jbspowercenter.com for the latest updates.
You can find the JB's Powercast at jbspowercenter.com, YouTube, and Facebook. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. JB's Powercast is a JB's Power Center production and is produced by Stephen MD and Sean Lansman.